Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel, and was it me, or was today just a little brighter, a little nicer? People were a little friendlier today. Was that my imagination, or did that actually happen? Was the world just a better place February 2nd, 2016 than it normally is? And I don't think it has anything to do with it being Groundhog Day. I have a fantastic Groundhog Day story from my own personal life that occurred 19 years today, but I'm going to leave that to the end of the show if I have a few minutes left, because I want to get right into what happened at the Iowa caucus yesterday. By the time you're listening to the show, every conservative and liberal commentator has covered it up, down, sideways, backwards, crisscross, catty corner, up and down and all over the place. So I'm going to be honest that I don't know how much new stuff I can bring to the conversation, but I'm going to try. And you know that I tend to look at political issues maybe from a different point of view than your average conservative anyway. I come to my conclusions in a few different ways than the rest. I do not like, being that I'm a writer, I don't like to be cliched. So I think that's part of it. But it does seem to me that today was just a little nicer day than you'd normally expect. And why? Because Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucus. Let's just be honest. As you know, I'm not rooting for anybody particular. I'm not endorsing anybody. I'm not giving money to anybody. I am not attending a rally for anybody. I'm not going to an event just so I can shake some politician's hand. I don't do that here. I know there are other shows on Red State Talk Radio where I think the hosts take great pride in knowing this famous person and that famous person, and they get those people to come on their shows and do interviews. I don't do that here. All right? I just don't. I want to make sure when I come to this microphone that you know that I'm not being biased in any direction but conservatism. And the only way I can be sure that you know that is by me not kissing anybody's butt in particular. Heck, I've even managed to throw out a couple compliments to Donald Trump over the last month. But I think today the Republican Party is much better off with Ted Cruz winning, even though those people who run the party probably aren't that ecstatic. Like I've said before, I think that down deep they'd rather have Donald Trump win this primary than Ted Cruz. Because in the end, the leaders in the Republican Party don't want to have to get behind a guy who shut the government down a couple years ago. There's a lot of things the Republican nominee can do that the party will go along with. But shutting down the government is not one of them. And that's why I continue to maintain that in the end, Rance Priebus and the rest of them, people who have been entrenched in the machinations, the red tape, the bureaucrats of the Republican Party, will go along with Donald Trump before they will Ted Cruz. Now, it may be that they find a savior for their side, for the more entrenched Republican people. They may find a savior in Marco Rubio. Maybe. And we'll get to that when I start talking about him. But let's talk about the winner, the winner, Ted Cruz. Got more votes in any Republican primary in Iowa in the history of the world. In fact, he got just a few less than the combined votes for Santorum and Mitt Romney in 2012. That's impressive. Remember, see, these days, can you believe anything? Like I've told you, I'm just a person like you are. That's the very reason that I don't have famous people, or I don't pursue well-known people to be on the show, because I want to be like you. I want to be able to just read the news and try to figure out what's going on in the world, because that's how most people have to do it. 99% of people do not have any special access, any back doors to Washington, D.C. or anything like that. All they do is get on the radio, go to the internet, turn on the TV to figure out what's going on. And what were we being told? That, well, a high turnout, that's certainly going to be in Donald Trump's favor. Wasn't the case at all. In fact, it looks like a high turnout helped Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio the most. That those people who got involved this year who hadn't been involved before kind of went to a couple guys who are already in Congress. Some of those new people went to Donald Trump, but surely a lot less than was expected. And that goes to explain why everybody was bragging, I guess, about Ted Cruz's ground game. They were thinking that he was just making sure all of the regular Iowa caucus people show up. Here, he was out there mining for new people. And it looks like he found quite a few. And it very well may be, being that Marco Rubio did not have that much of a ground game. In fact, he only concentrated on Iowa for the last couple weeks. There could be that Ted Cruz, in his ground game, going to every county in Iowa, actually might have helped out turnout for some of the other candidates. That's very possible, too. Fascinating night. I actually knew early on, I was watching it on the computer. I actually chose to watch Fox Business instead of regular Fox News. I watched Fox Business with Neil Cavuto instead. It was nice. Nice seeing some people you don't normally see. And I knew early on that Ted Cruz was going to have a pretty good night. Probably about the 25% reported in number, 30%. When he was continuing to be up as the percentages changed, like I said, from the 20s into the 30s, that I thought, I think he has a pretty good chance of winning this. I felt pretty confident. However, I didn't realize how close Marco Rubio would come to beating Donald Trump. Just, if you don't know, Donald Trump was closer in percentages to Marco Rubio than he was to Ted Cruz. I think Ted Cruz beat Donald Trump by about 5,000 votes, whereas Donald Trump only beat third place Marco Rubio by about 2,000 votes. There's another huge point regarding Ted Cruz, and this was something I tweeted last night at the end when it was all over that got a lot of favorable replies on Twitter, that because of Ted Cruz, no Republican should ever go to Iowa ever again and be fearful about talking about ending corn subsidies. He has to be the first Republican, maybe the first politician in history that went to that state, actively campaigned on ending the corn subsidy. Now, granted, he didn't talk about ending it tomorrow or his first day in office, but a gradual phase out over 5 years. I'll take it. He's the first guy, first candidate, doesn't matter male or female, first candidate who went there and didn't try to hide what he wanted to say about corn subsidies. Little did we, everybody's talking about Donald Trump. Well, he's just throwing the playbook out the window on how to win elections and how to run elections and how to get votes in Iowa. It was Ted Cruz who did that, and he did it on principle. And that's a good example of what we as conservatives, regular conservatives out here have been saying for a while. You're so afraid of talking about this subsidy and taking this back and taking that back. Well, why don't you just try and see what happens? And really what we found is it didn't hurt him seemingly at all. And this was, and he was up against the governor of Iowa. We'll talk about that in a second. And the governor's son, who are, of course, huge into the corn lobby and are big believers in ethanol. A subsidy that should have been ended years and years ago for many different reasons. Not just for conservative reasons, big government reasons either. Ethanol is hell on your car. For that reason alone, we shouldn't have it. Your average automobile is not made to run ethanol through it. I'm sure there are machines out there where ethanol can be used, but not in cars. But there Ted Cruz was, bucking the trend like he has been doing since he came to Congress, went to the Senate, ticking people off, saying things that allegedly shouldn't be said. You can't win saying that. You can't win doing that. If you shut the government down, you're going to hurt their prospects in 2014. Didn't happen. If you talk about corn subsidies and cutting them in Iowa, you can't win. That didn't happen. And I know he's not a perfect guy. I watched his acceptance speech or his winning speech, not a very good one. Let's put it this way. I can see why people watch him speak and are turned off. See, my difference is I'm totally over appearances. I'm just totally over them. The only time I care about appearances is when I'm looking at women. That's it. Everything else, it comes down to integrity, character, and what's coming out of what is he actually or she actually saying. And what he said was good. How he goes about it, questionable. But I think we in the United States, we Americans, I think we're going to have to put style to the side. Because government is not about style. It's about substance, about doing things that mean things. And we've had a guy in office for the last 7 years who is all about style, all about cool. And we see what we got. We see it. And Ted Cruz is the opposite of that. Despite what you may think about him as a person, as a showman. But when I know that, hey, when he is not afraid to tick off his fellow senators, that should be a win. That's something that I think we as conservatives have been wanting for a long time, well before Barack Obama came along, well before George W. Bush came along, before John Kerry and Al Gore and all this. This goes back to the 1990s, I think. A guy who's not afraid to shake things up. The first person I think of is Newt Gingrich. In 1994, he shook the Congress up, specifically the House. And that was a net win for us. And this is what Ted Cruz is doing 20 years later. And it seems like he's running his campaign that way, and I appreciate it. But a big win, more votes than anybody has ever gotten. Kicked Donald Trump's butt, kicked Marco Rubio's butt. We're going to talk about those guys. Had a huge turnout and did it on principle. Did not have to pander to anyone to win. Good old-fashioned getting out there and talking to people. which is something I guess we can see from Iowa that is underrated these days. We're so caught up in social media and Facebook and connecting with people on Twitter and getting followers and following people and hashtags and all of that, and pictures on Instagram and the WhatsApp and Snapchat and getting voters that way and getting voters this way. In Iowa, it looks like you still have to go out and shake people's hands and press the flesh or press the skin, whatever that saying is. Let's move on to Donald Trump. I'm going to try to not beat him up too much because, frankly, his is it a concession speech? His coming in second speech was a fine one. Didn't give Ted Cruz. In fact, when I listened to it the first time, I didn't even hear him mention Ted Cruz's name. It was only when I saw a clip of it again that he just said Ted. I mean, if your ears stopped working for that second, you would have missed that he even congratulated Ted Cruz. But he did. He was friendly, and he was only out there for 3 minutes, which has to be a record for Donald Trump. His lack of a framework in Iowa hurt him. I think his lack of experience in politics hurt him. I'm going to keep his positions and his personality totally out of it for now. I think that he, like I was just saying, he got a little too caught up in social media, doing a couple interviews and saying some outrageous things, making a couple outrageous statements. I think that we now know, or we found out maybe the 2 days before, that he did no internal polling and he just went by what the news polls were saying, whether it was Emerson College or Quinnipiac or whoever else, Gallup, which was a mistake. And those are mistakes that newbies make. He was trying to run a different kind of campaign that I'm not unique in saying. That's been said for a long time since he jumped in. Kind of relying on his personality alone. And everybody's recognition of his name, being that he's been part of American culture for almost 30 years. From USFL to business to TV shows to golf tournaments, to his hair, and everything that he's done. And he thought that was going to be good enough. I'm glad to know, and this isn't because I don't like Donald Trump. I'm glad to know that you need to do more than that to still win in the United States. I'm glad that you still need to go to every county in Iowa and talk to people to win, to have a chance to win. Obvious to me, though, he got a little too caught up in the technology side of it, the internet side of it, the relying on his prior fame and his TV shows, everything, a little too much. A little too much. Now, what can he do about that in New Hampshire? I'm not sure what he's going to need to do. The polls are out there. If you want to believe them, this is the reason that I've been saying for several weeks, going to a couple months, that I will talk about the polls, but what do I say? If you want to believe them. The truth is, the polls in Iowa were wrong. I wouldn't say they were way off, but they were wrong. Considerably wrong. They predicted one thing, a person to win, another person won. Which is a big deal. You get the numbers wrong within the margin of error in a poll, that's one thing. But when you predict a particular winner and another guy wins instead, that's a miss. That's a considerable miss that sometimes can cost pollsters their jobs. Donald Trump bought into that, and it cost him. Now, the rest of it, if we bring in his politics and his personality, I do think that missing that last debate hurt him, but not as much. Now that I look at the numbers and just I think I understand what went on, not as much as we may think. It probably cost him a couple percent, but he lost by almost 4%. He finished, according to the last poll, the most accurate poll, he finished 6 or 7 percentage points lower than he was predicted to. That would be hard for me to say that it was all based on him not showing up for that debate. I think he lost a little bit. And it seems to me, and the funny part is last night I was talking to a friend of mine over Facebook, or technically Facebook Messenger, because I really don't go onto my Facebook feed that much anymore. But I was telling him, it seems to me that those votes that were going to go to Donald Trump went to Marco Rubio. And then about 5 minutes later, an article on redstate.com, the other Red State, redstate.com, the blog, an article was posted there saying that exact same thing, making the exact same point, which was kind of funny. And it could be that just that small percentage of people saw Donald Trump, didn't go to that debate, didn't like that, say, well, we can't vote for Ted Cruz. He just turns us off this reason, that reason, maybe because of corn subsidies. So we're going to go to Marco Rubio. It's very possible. Now, here's another point about Donald Trump not having a framework. There's a reason. There's a reason why he did, and it's partly because of him being a newbie. But a lot of new politicians have gone to Iowa over the years and managed to cobble together some sort of a framework to get people out to caucus for them and to talk to people about why they should be voting for Donald Trump. There are several stories out there. There were several stories out there today, and I'm sure we're going to get more as the days go on, of several caucus places where no Donald Trump person showed up. Nobody connected to his campaign showed up, could kind of wrangle all the Donald Trump people together. That's a big deal. That's embarrassing. That should be, for a guy who is polling first and the time and effort that he's put into all of this, to not have people connected to him to show up at some of these places, that's a travesty. And I think for Trump supporters, you have to really think about that. I know I don't want to troll you, but you have to start thinking, why is that? What does that mean? That's like McDonald's running out of French fries. That's like Pizza Hut running out of pepperoni. That's like Apple running out of laptops or iPhones. It's just not supposed to happen. You lose, okay. You made your best argument in all these different precincts there. You lose, way it goes. But if he loses because he just can't get everybody together, allegedly, him having all this support, that says something else. See, there's a part of me that believes that Donald Trump really doesn't like hanging out with regular people. And that's part of the reason that he didn't have the framework that he should have in Iowa. Once again, this is just a suspicion. I think the reason that he relied so much on technology and just his personality in front of a camera is because he's not really that much of a people person. Now, the reason he's not a people person, I'd have to say it as a non-Trump guy, I'd have to say it's because of his arrogance. It's part of it. But I think that there's another part of it too. I don't know if Donald Trump is really that hard of a worker. I don't know if he's truly a grinder. Whereas Ted Cruz showed that he's a grinder. Of course, we know he's not afraid of going and talking to people. Several stories going out there for months. And you can say that about most of the candidates. They'll get out there, they'll go to the cafe, they'll go to the diner, they'll go to the bar, where there's only 50 people, and they'll talk to them. Donald Trump, I'm not saying he didn't do any of that, but he didn't go to every county in Iowa like Ted Cruz did. Despite having the support of the governor of Iowa, despite having people there who were favoring him, despite him going there and pandering to the corn subsidy lobby, yeah, right, LOBBY, all of that, I just don't know if he's a grinder. I just don't know if he's a people person. And that reminds me of somebody else. That reminds me of Barack Obama. He's not a grinder either. And he's not a people person either. And I think to be a good president, you have to be both. That's why Bill Clinton, despite all of his other problems, was a successful politician. There was not a location he would not show up to. And Bill Clinton is notoriously or famously, however you want to put it, a people person. Even though the funny thing is I've forgotten is he actually lost Iowa and New Hampshire in 1992 and still won. That's a nice showing by him. That's what I mean, kind of a grinder. Donald Trump, not a grinder, and that's what worries me. I think to be president, you have to be a grinder. It's why I think George W. Bush was a better president than George Herbert Walker Bush, his dad. Bush 41 never seemed like too much of a grinder to me. George W. Bush, much more of a grinder, even though he wasn't conservative. Ronald Reagan, the way he grounded out in California with all those crazy people out there, even in the late 60s, early 70s, grinder. Grounded out in 76, giving Gerald Ford a hard a time as he could. And that carried over to 1980. Obviously, Ronald Reagan was a people person. Not an easy guy to get to know, but he was certainly friendly and loved going to all these events and being nice to little old ladies. There's a big difference. And Barack Obama is not that. Donald Trump is not that. So it's just not him being a newbie. I think that there's a part of his personality that doesn't want to do everything that it takes to win the presidency. It's no different than maybe you know of a new store, a new coffee shop or something. And you go by every day, and there's nobody outside with a sign, no balloons outside, nothing like that. But you go online, if you go to their website, it's this great website. Their Facebook page has 5,000 likes. They have all these Twitter people, followers. But you go by the store, and it just seems like it's dead. That's probably the kind of person who runs that store, who's not a grinder, thinking, I can just do this online in this type of way. And to be successful, I think, in anything, you need all of it. You need it all. Now, maybe Donald Trump will learn that. We'll see. We'll see if he needs it in New Hampshire. But I think that past there, South Carolina and elsewhere, he's going to need a better framework than he had in Iowa, I think. I really do believe that. Because he's not going to enjoy coming in second for long. And I want to continue to talk about that after the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
I know you're watching, so pay attention. You hate my freedom, my religion, and my country. You hate me for speaking my mind. You try to control me with violence and intimidation. You think you can muzzle me with fear? Don't ever confuse me for my politicians or my media. I am an American, free-born and free-bred, and I will call you out for who you are. An Islamic extremist who would kill me for my beliefs. You don't intimidate me. My freedom is more powerful than anything you can possibly do, and I will never, never surrender my rights to your terror. I will say what I think, worship according to my beliefs, and raise my children how I see fit, and I defend it all with the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I cower to no one, because I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I am freedom's safest place.
This is Donna Fiducia. For 26 years, I was a member of the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has failed you miserably. Red State Talk Radio will not fail you. Tune into Red State Talk Radio at redstatetalkradio.com, the dominant force in conservative Internet talk radio.
I lost my brother Frank in the Battle of Iwo Jima.
He served on 4 combat tours.
In Vietnam,
In Iraq.
Afghanistan.
There's a life that was lost behind that pin.
I put it on for my wife.
For my husband.
My brother.
My dad.
My son.
We wear it because we honor those that we lost.
To learn more about the stories behind the Gold Star Pins, visit goldstarpins.org.
This is Jeff Carlisi from the Band 38 Special. You're listening to Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
We're back at the Dentzel domain on Red State Talk Radio. I'm going to continue to talk about Donald Trump and what it means for him going forward, and then we can move on to Marco Rubio, and then I'll add in some other comments. Donald Trump, because of who he is and the way he's set himself up, cannot finish second for long. His candidacy is not based on principles. I know that's not what his supporters want to hear. But it's based on just the power of his personality, the power to get things done, whatever that means. The belief that his supporters have that he can get any other country in the world to bow to us for, to build a wall, 45% tariffs and whatever else, and every other country in the world is just going to go along with it. It's not based on any political principles, anything that makes sense. That's why I believe that Ted Cruz supporters, and I don't even know if there are as many Ted Cruz supporters as there are Trump supporters, but that Ted Cruz supporters, I think, will stick along much longer than Trump supporters will. It's also the reason, for example, with Marco Rubio, I believe that as well. Trump's candidacy is based on inevitability, and as soon as he doesn't look inevitable, some of those supporters are going to drop out. They may just totally drop out, or they may go to one of the other candidates, like I suspect they did in Iowa yesterday, and going to, for the most part, I think, Marco Rubio. So another candidate, for example, going back to 92 with Clinton could lose Iowa and New Hampshire and recover. I'm not sure that Donald Trump can do that. I think that some of his supporters, now some of them are hardcore, and you're not going to be able to peel those people away. I don't know what you can do about that. But for some of those people who are conservative and really wanted to go outside the mainstream, but at their heart, they're still conservative, they may start thinking, well, he loses Iowa and really underperforms. There didn't just lose, but underperforms. Goes to New Hampshire, was supposed to win by so many points, double digits, and he only wins by 3 or 4. And then people in South Carolina start getting serious, and he's in second and third place. That can start to put doubt in people's minds. And if he loses New Hampshire, and I was thinking it was 2 weeks away, it's only a week away. It's funny how these days just fly right by. It also shows you that I am not a political guy. I'm a conservative guy, which I've been telling you since the beginning. That if one of these others, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, can beat him and move him into second in place in New Hampshire, it's I think huge. That's huge damage to Donald Trump going forward to South Carolina and wherever else. Whereas Marco Rubio, for example, coming in third in Iowa, then second in New Hampshire, just for example, is a huge win for him. Ted Cruz, he can afford to come in second in New Hampshire. Now the later you go, though, you better start winning something. I think that's where Marco Rubio right now, what he has to figure out. How is he going to win one of these upcoming states? The first 4 or 5 states. May not be able to win New Hampshire, may not be able to win South Carolina, but after that, how does he win? Is he going to have to rely on some of these other guys dropping out, or woman, Carly Fiorina, dropping out, and those supporters go to him? Is that what it's going to be? I guess that's a decent plan, but I wouldn't bank on it. He may be trying to make some deals behind the scenes if he suspects some of these people are going to drop out. But that's just with the candidate himself or herself. That's not with his or her supporters. Those people could go in a dozen different directions. Some might even go to the Democrats. Who knows? So Marco Rubio is going to have a plan to win one of these. Donald Trump, it's even a bigger deal that he has to win one of these upcoming states. Even a bigger deal. Much more than Marco Rubio. Of course, much more than Ted Cruz. And he may have some problems doing that. We'll see. This time next week, is it Monday or Tuesday next week? I don't even know. But we'll talk about it. But I would just, if you see what the polls are, I would just temper your sadness or enthusiasm, depending on which way they go, if you are a Trump supporter or a non-Trump supporter. It's obvious to me polling is getting harder and harder. I'm glad I'm not in that business. Marco Rubio. The pundits, Fox and elsewhere, are saying that he was the big winner last night. And I listened to his speech. He had the best speech. Guy can talk. No doubt about it. I am glad, I can say that as a Gen Xer, I was born in 1970, I am very pleased with Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio representing my generation very well. Very, very proud of them. Just take the politics out of it for a second, but the way they handle themselves, the personality that they show, I hope that as I get older, more Gen X politicians and public leaders are like they are. Even though I know they're not going to be as conservative as I am, but the way these guys have conducted themselves makes me very happy. You know that I've talked about it a couple times before. I do not hold in very high regard the baby boomer generation. That's the generation ahead of mine. It was the greatest generation, then the baby boomers, and then the Gen Xers, and then what is it, the millennials, or the Gen Yers, then the millennials. But the baby boomers have been a disaster for this country. No matter, I know there's a lot of conservatives out there, but as a whole, that generation has been a disaster. And the sooner we can get all of those people out of politics, the happier I'll be. Just to be honest. In any case, with Marco Rubio, it certainly seemed like a victory speech last night, but it wasn't. Overperformed. I think he overperformed much to Donald Trump's detriment. I don't know how many of those votes Marco Rubio actually earned on his stances, his personality alone. He may have, like I said, he may have got the residual of the other candidate, the supporters of other candidates who got there and said, well, my guy's not going to win. Carly Fiorina's not going to win. I'll just go to Marco Rubio. I guess, it all counts. I guess it doesn't matter, but it could end up mattering somewhere down the road. That I think he has to prove that he can get votes or win one of these states on himself alone and not relying just on some disgruntled supporters of other candidates. That's going to be a key for him. Now, as far as New Hampshire goes, I don't think he has any shot of winning there. He's going to have to figure out, like I just said before, he's going to have to figure out how to win in one of these states down the road somewhere because he's not going to win New Hampshire. Not going to do it. Ted Cruz may do it. Right now, Donald Trump seems most likely to do it. And I know that John Kasich is showed well there. These Chris Christie maybe looking to have a nice showing there. And that's all of those guys are going to make Marco Rubio look less attractive at this point, right now, since all of those people are still involved. Marco Rubio, though, still seen as an establishment candidate. Is he? I know that he was with the Gang of Eight, and I don't like that. And we're going to get into a little, like I said, with particulars of once I finish talking about Marco Rubio. We're going to get into some of the other things regarding Iowa. I would be perfectly fine as a conservative, Marco Rubio as a nominee. I know that flies in the face of a lot of other conservatives out there. I saw Ann Coulter making some comments on Twitter last night. She has completely lost her mind. She and I haven't even talked about Sarah Palin and her appearance yesterday for Donald Trump, which was in a travesty. I do not know what has happened to these women. I don't know. Laura Ingraham, Ann Coulter, Sarah Palin. I just have a question. Has anybody ever seen all of them in the same place at the same time? Are they all just the same person? Because the way they talk, it's like they all have lost their minds over Donald Trump and then making fun of all the other candidates. I don't know. And it's worn really, really, really thin. But Ann Coulter's talking about Marco Rubio, and he's Fox News' little boy, and last time I checked, Ann Coulter still appears on Fox News, right? But I'm happy for Marco Rubio. I think, though, that he overstated his win a lot. Listening to his speech, overstated it just a little bit. We may look back at that speech a few weeks from now after he loses New Hampshire and loses South Carolina and saying, well, he was certainly counting his eggs before they were hatched. I think that's very possible. So those are the three. three big guys who did well. Ben Carson, he had his complaints saying there were some tricksterisms from the Cruz campaign, telling people that Carson was dropping out. Who has to be worried right now is Republican leadership. And I'm not going to call them the establishment because I don't know if that word means anything anymore. But those more moderate Republicans, seeing how Jeb Bush did, I should say, or how badly he did, and Chris Christie, Carla Fiorina, John Kasich, all of those people, Mike Huckabee, of course, dropped out, did horrible. They did absolutely horrible there. And I think that this is only going to hurt their chances even more of doing well in New Hampshire. In fact, you could see some of the pictures, like Carla Fiorina, where she was supposed to speak after the caucus were done. She didn't do that. It was just a darkened room with some Carly Fiorina posters up there. I saw that from Martin O'Malley. I haven't even talked about the Democrats yet. Martin O'Malley, the dark room where his posters were. Kind of sad. Kind of sad. I don't want to be any Schadenfreude here, but kind of sad, not so sad. Not that I mind Carla Fiorina, but that's just politics. That's just the way it goes. You win some, lose some. There's winners and losers. But all that group, they got a long way to come back. Long way. Long, long way. In fact, it's probably impossible. Which is good. Because now I would say that I could live with two-thirds of the leaders in the Republican Party who are running for the nomination, which is more than I could say back in 2012 and 2008. That's me. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. Let's move on to a couple other points. The great turnout, I think that's a good sign for Republicans come November, unless the nominee is Donald Trump. With all of this alleged energy that people had, the Democrats had for Bernie Sanders, all these young people, the Republicans dwarfed the Democrats yesterday in turnout, which is also a good sign. They did some polling of people who went to the caucuses. Immigration was only considered to be an important topic to 13% of the people who showed up to caucus yesterday. 13%. I've tried to tell you that we as conservatives have allowed that topic to be overblown. It's an important topic. I want the law to be followed. But if any of these candidates makes immigration, whether for it or against it, a major leg of their campaign, that's going to be a mistake. That is not where a majority of the Americans care about immigration. They do. But not necessarily in the ways that politicians on either side of the topic are talking about it. They're more worried about terrorism. I know immigration could be connected to terrorism, but only tangentially. They're worried about jobs. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about the debt. I think a lot of people are concerned about their gun rights, other issues. Immigration is an important one, but only in the context of the laws should be followed. And to go any further than that as a politician, going as crazy as Ann Coulter and Donald Trump have gotten, or being the opposite and just letting everybody in like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton would do, is going to be a mistake if that's what a politician wants to run on. That's just where we are. And that's why I've said from day one, if I was a politician, I'd say, whatever the laws are, whether I like them or not, let's just follow them for 5 years and see what happens. If I'm president for 4 years, let's just see. Go to your books, Border Patrol, whatever the law says, we're going to follow it. And if anybody gets in the way of that, we'll make them try to explain to us why they don't want to follow the law. We don't need more laws. We don't need less laws. Let's just see what the laws do in the first place and make a decision from there. If you get anywhere outside of that as a politician right now, I think it's a mistake. And I think that this question that people were asked in Iowa shows it. People still matter. I made that point. You still have to go out and press the flesh. Can't just do it social media style. On the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton is going to win the nomination. And that's why, because of that, the courts are not going to indict her. The courts don't want to get involved in indicting a person who could be running for president. That's just something we as conservatives and Republicans are going to have to live with. That's just the way it is. I know about Joe Biden getting involved. I don't know if that's going to happen. Bernie Sanders had his shot last night. Now, he's going to win in New Hampshire, but the way the Democrats have their system set up is different from the Republicans. That Hillary Clinton really doesn't have to do that much to get the nomination, you're finding out. And I think that with Bernie Sanders, the passion for him is going to drop off quickly. That doesn't mean the passion is going to transfer over Hillary Clinton. She has a lot of problems just politically. Forget about all the... Now, maybe it does go over to how people view her, but just her as a person and the way she campaigns and everything is a loser. Is a loser. Doesn't mean she can't win. Because all sorts of crazy things can happen. But tying him, she had it's like a do-over from 2008. She got another chance to win Iowa by a wide margin. She couldn't do it. That spells big trouble for her, I think. And there were the coin tosses and all that. That just adds to the bizarreness of it. So that's all I really, got to say. Like I said, maybe a lot of it's what you've heard already. That's all I got to say regarding Iowa. But I do want to tell you one more thing, and it was my groundhog story. I went to Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, first time in 1997, February 2nd, with a woman I was dating at the time. Crazy time. If you ever go to that, it's nothing like the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. It's out in the middle of the woods. It takes place at like 6 in the morning. It's dark. There's spotlights. It looks like a UFO is landing. And you can't go and park up there. It was so busy. You had to jump on these school buses to take you up to the location. And the roads were all muddy, and it had rained. And a ton of people there. Punxsutawney Phil comes out. I can't remember if he saw his shadow or not. And as soon as that's done, everybody starts running back toward the school buses. Took us 2 hours to get out of there. And the road was muddy. I mean, it was so muddy that the buses were like leaning into the ditch, sliding into the ditch as they were going to pick people up. My girlfriend and I got separated. I ended up having to climb through a school bus window. You know, there's what kind that you press the buttons, they slide down. I was able to do a pull-up. She opened the window. I pulled myself up there because she got separated. She got onto the bus I didn't. And there was no way I was waiting any longer. I said, pull this window down. I crawled into the bus through the window to get the hell out of Groundhog Day on February 2nd, 1997. It was a great time. But you've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. You can find me at edwarddentzel.com. You can go to edwarddentzel.com/book to download the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks. You can find my other books at amazon.com. You can also find my shows at SoundCloud, Podbean, YouTube. You can also find them in the iTunes store in the podcast section. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It was a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.